Hello, so bronzers. Lots of people are a bit scared of bronzers because they can look so fake and orangey, and also people aren't really sure what they're for. But basically bronzers, in this instance bronzing powders, are there to do literally that, just add some colour to your face. And it's always the best thing to add colour to your face after you've got your base on, because with your base you want to match your skin tone, not try and tinker with the colour. And bronzer comes in to then tinker with the colour if you want a little more, or if you want some darkness, or if the rest of you's tanned and you've been wearing sunblock on your face, or whatever. So this is the best way to do it. Now, as ever, the way to stop it looking unnatural is good application and correct product choice. Now, when I say correct product choice, obviously the main thing to consider is colour. As a rule, you want to avoid things that are orange, and you want to choose things that are more of a true tan or a pale brown. This is because orange looks fake and you get that kind of, Michelle Heaton, Katie Price sort of look. And also I find that in hot weather, the sort of pH in your skin makes bronzer look a bit oranger than it naturally is. So you want to kind of try and be as neutral as possible. And the other thing about application is that it doesn't replace your blush, it goes underneath your blush, because what bronzer does is it gives you quite a flat colour. It doesn't make anything pop, so it's not a sort of pretty effect, it's more of a contouring and deepening effect. So you're not replacing your blusher, you're simply choosing another layer to go underneath. Now, for example, if you're as pale as I am, I currently don't have anything on my cheeks or whatever, so I'm looking especially pale, you want a pale bronzer because you're obviously trying to mimic a suntan, and I'm never going to go a dark, dark, dark tan. So in order to fake how I would naturally go in the sun, I want something like this that's a bit sort of pale. More and more companies now are doing a sort of double bronzer, like this one by Clinique, where you have a darker tone that you can kind of place on judicious areas, or if your tan darkens naturally over the course of the summer, and these are quite useful. You'll notice actually that this one has a little bit of sparkle in, and that can be really, really pretty, but in general you want to keep it to a minimum. You don't want a very sort of glittery bronzer. You want one with no more than a little shimmer, or even a matte one, like this one or this one. Now, as I was saying before, because you want to layer your blusher over the top of your bronzer, lots of companies are now doing double bronzers with the blush, a complementary blush colour in, which is really, really great. So like there's this one by NARS, which has the Laguna bronzer in, which is a really, really good bronzer, and the Orgasm blush, which is my favourite blusher. And then Laura Mercier does bronzers with a complementary blush next to it. This corally colour is really, really lovely. Or alternatively, you can just, buy a single blusher or use your existing one. In general, over a bronzer, I find that coral, peach, pink, rose, those sorts of colours go really, really nicely over the top, rather than a reddy, purpley tone. You want more of a sort of pretty flush over the top. Anyway, so I'm now going to show you how to put it on. So I'll just put my hair back and then I'll show you. Okay, so I've got my hair back so you can see what I'm doing. The first thing you need to do is grab a tissue. Any old tissue or loo roll, or when I'm doing my makeup on the train on a commute, I tend to use my coffee napkin. You just want something to blot with. Then you want a large fat brush. So bigger than a blusher brush, smaller than a big powder brush, so somewhere in the middle. This is my favourite one, it's ancient. Again, as a general rule of thumb, if you're applying something that has a powdery consistency, you want something with natural bristles. If you're applying something with a creamy consistency, you want a synthetic brush. So, take your bronzer. I'm going to use this one by Clinique, which is Almost Bronzer in Light. Then you want to load up your brush. Now you can be quite generous with loading it up, because what you want to do is you want to get it evenly into the bristles of the brush, not just on the tips. And believe it or not, even though that seems like a lot of product, that stops you from getting the streaks because the brush is properly loaded up. It's not kind of heavy on one side and not on the other. When it's loaded up, take your tissue and stroke your brush on your tissue, and what that does is it gets rid of the excess. take your mirror and you now want to dust your bronzer wherever the sun would naturally hit. So think about where you could get sunburned. So cheekbones. Imagine if you're on a skiing holiday, which is quite a leap for me. Imagine where you would get sunburnt. Over the cheeks, chin, and again you're kind of going in circular, soft movements. Chin, up here on your forehead. Now, lots of makeup artists and journalists suggest that you also put bronzer on your nose. This is such personal preference. I can totally see the logic of it because the sun does catch your nose, but I hate it when the sun catches my nose, so I don't put it on my nose. But if you like the way your nose looks when you've been out in the sun too long, by all means put it on your nose. Now, as you can see, that isn't streaky or obvious because I've loaded up the brush properly and then dusted it off. But you can also see that my skin is visibly darker than it was. Now, it does look quite flat. There's no sort of perkiness in the cheeks, which I'm very keen on, as you know. So we're now going to take a blusher colour and a blusher brush, and as I've shown you in previous videos, layer that over the top. By the way, if it's winter time, you don't need to stop using bronzer. You just want to go for a lighter one or just a flat brown blusher underneath. Because I still think that double layered effect looks much better than just blush on its own. So stick with your bronzer, but maybe just go down a couple of shades, because obviously it's not feasible that you would be brown in the winter. So blusher brush, a bit smaller than the bronzer brush. Take your blusher, in this instance NARS Deep Throat, which is the one I use most days. Load up your brush, and exactly the same as before, dust it off on a tissue so you haven't got too much colour on there. Then this time you're doing the same thing except just on your cheeks and just on the fat bits. So if you smile in a slightly idiotic fashion and just stroke it, swirl it just on the circular parts, those kind of plump bits, what beauty journalists call apples. And as you'll see, that then brings a sort of perky glow back rather than that kind of flat bronzer. However, if I'd just put my blusher on its own, it wouldn't have that same kind of depth of field and contouring effect. So I really do think the two together is the best way to go. Take my hair out. So, as I hope you can see, I'm significantly less pale than I was before, and that's how you put on bronzer. Give that technique a go. It's absolutely foolproof as long as you have the right brushes and the right colour bronzer, and let me know how you get on in the comments section. Thanks.